Have you ever stood on the edge of an important decision and suddenly heard a voice in your mind that wasn't really yours? Maybe you were about to take a risk and a quiet whisper said, "Don't ruin everything." Or you felt excited about a new idea until a sharp internal tone snapped, "Who do you think you are?" What's strange is that these voices don't sound like thoughts you consciously chose. They sound like echoes, familiar, automatic, and old. And often, if you listen closely, you can trace them back to someone from your past. A parent whose approval you longed for, a teacher who doubted you, a partner who criticized more than they supported. Today, we're exploring why these voices linger, how they shape your decisions and reactions without your permission, and how to finally hear your own voice beneath the noise. Because the truth is, some of the beliefs that steer your life were never yours to begin with. To understand echo thinking, imagine your mind as a hall with excellent acoustics. Every impactful sentence spoken to you, especially during childhood or vulnerable moments, leaves an imprint. Some imprints fade, but others settle deep into the structure of your identity. This is because your brain is constantly learning what to expect, how to behave, and who you're supposed to be. And it learns these lessons not only from events, but from tone, repetition, and emotional intensity. When someone important says, "You're too sensitive," "You should try harder," or even "Be realistic," your brain stores that message as a kind of shortcut, a fast, preloaded interpretation of similar situations in the future. Over time, these shortcuts become internal voices, not symbolic ones. Real internal echoes that feel like your own thoughts, yet they carry someone else's rhythm, someone else's vocabulary, someone else's fear. This is why in moments of vulnerability, your mind doesn't offer your authentic opinion. It offers the loudest echoes. To your brain, this is efficiency. Instead of evaluating every moment from scratch, it uses pre-recorded templates. Psychologists call this internalized self-talk or introjected beliefs. But to make it simpler, imagine each influential person from your past leaving behind a microphone in your mind. Some microphones whisper when you're tired, others shout when you're stressed. Some try to protect you, others shame you into silence. And although they all feel internal, their origins are external. Why does your brain do this? Because during development, your mind is constantly trying to figure out how to survive socially. You learn through imitation, approval, correction, and emotional feedback. If a parent's disappointment feels dangerous, your brain creates an echo to prevent you from repeating the mistake. If a teacher praises you only when you play small, your brain internalizes that shrinking yourself equals safety. These patterns continue long into adulthood because the brain prefers what is familiar over what is true. Familiar echoes feel reliable even if they limit you. Think of echo thinking like a chorus. Some voices warn, some criticize, some urge caution, some guilt trip you into conformity. But all of them speak quickly, much faster than your conscious mind can. This is why in moments of stress or high stakes you might hear, "Don't mess this up," even if you logically know you're capable. Or when you try something new, an echo says, "People like you don't do that," even though there's no factual basis for it. The problem is that these echoes don't announce their source. They just show up as thoughts you assume are your own. You might even use them to judge yourself without realizing that the standards you're failing to meet are someone else's outdated expectations. Let's break down the 3 most common sources of echo thinking so you can begin to recognize which ones live in your own mental space. The first source is parental echoes. These are the most powerful because they form when your brain is still wiring its core beliefs about safety and worth. If your parents were anxious, you likely internalized vigilance. If they were critical, you internalized perfectionism. If they were unpredictable, you internalized hyper-awareness of other people's moods. The second source is authority echoes. Teachers, coaches, or mentors whose words carried emotional weight. A teacher who once said, "You're not creative," can become a lifetime echo that stops you from exploring entirely unrelated fields. The third source is relational echoes, romantic partners or close friends whose approval shaped your self-image. A partner who mocked your ambitions or dismissed your feelings may still influence the way you talk to yourself years later. The hardest part is that echo thinking feels personal even when it's inherited. You might believe you're being realistic, practical, or self-aware, when in fact you're repeating phrases implanted by someone who didn't see your potential clearly. Echo thinking is powerful because it blends with your identity. It doesn't feel like a memory. It feels like truth. And until you examine it, the echo remains in control. So how do you separate your real voice from the echoes? The first step is awareness. Notice how your internal voice sounds. Is its tone your natural tone, or does it sound like someone you know? Ask yourself, Would I speak to someone I love the way this voice speaks to me? If not, there's a good chance the message isn't truly yours. The second step is pattern mapping. Think back to phrases you heard repeatedly growing up or in emotionally intense periods of your life. What patterns do they follow? Control, judgment, fear. If your self-talk follows the same themes, you're dealing with echoes. A powerful technique here is the origin question. When you hear a harsh or limiting thought, ask, whose voice does this actually sound like? Many people are shocked to realize the answer comes immediately. The third step is emotional tracing. Echoes often carry emotional signatures: shame, anxiety, guilt, or urgency. Your true voice tends to feel calmer, slower, and more curious. If the thought feels like a punch, it's probably an echo. If it feels like guidance, it's closer to your authentic mind. Let's talk about the practical part, how to rewrite these echoes. The goal is not to erase them. Your brain never deletes old pathways entirely. Instead, you create stronger, clearer pathways that represent your values and identity today. One effective tool is what psychologists call cognitive reparenting. But let's make it accessible. Think of it as becoming the new narrator of your inner world. When an echo says, "Don't embarrass yourself," your new voice responds, "It's okay to try." When an echo says, "You'll fail," your new voice says, "Success isn't the only outcome that matters." You're not arguing with the echo. You're offering an alternative voice that gradually becomes louder with practice. Another technique is the reversal test. Take a harsh belief you hear often, like, "You never do anything right," and imagine saying it to a child you care about. The emotional discomfort that arises reveals how distorted the echo is. Your mind becomes clearer once you see how unacceptable these inherited messages really are. There's also the present alignment check. Ask yourself, does this belief reflect my life today or someone else's fears from years ago? Many echoes were formed in environments that no longer exist. You might still follow rules designed to keep a child safe, even though you're an adult capable of navigating complexity. You can also practice internal differentiation, labeling thoughts as echo or self. For example, instead of thinking, "I'm not good enough," you reframe it as, "That's the old echo of not enoughness." This tiny shift changes your relationship to the thought. It becomes something happening in your mind, not something defining you. Finally, begin strengthening your real voice by actively listening for it. Your authentic voice is quieter, but it's persistent. It appears in moments of curiosity, inspiration, inner warmth, or calm determination. Each time you choose that voice, you reinforce it neurologically. Over time, your mental acoustics change. The echoes fade, not because they vanish, but because they lose authority. As we move into the next part, we'll explore how to rebuild your identity once the echoes loosen their grip, how to cultivate a mental environment where your true voice can grow, and how to create internal habits that make you the author of your own thoughts rather than the echo chamber of old influences. Once you start recognizing the echoes, the next step is rebuilding a sense of self that isn't defined by them. And this part is both empowering and uncomfortable, because it requires you to ask a question many people avoid for years. If I remove all the external voices that shaped me, who am I actually? Not who you were told to be or trained to be or rewarded for being, but the person underneath, your real voice. At first it might feel faint, almost fragile, like a sound coming from another room. That's normal. Echoes are loud because they were repeated. Your voice gains strength through intentional use. One of the most transformative exercises here is what I call the inner room reset. Imagine your mind as a room filled with different voices talking over each other. Some are comforting, some critical, some insisting they know what's best. Instead of trying to silence them, you give each voice a seat. You don't let them shout over you. You simply observe them. You might notice that the voice urging you to be perfect doesn't actually sound like you. It sounds like a parent who feared judgment. The voice that tells you not to take risks sounds like a teacher who projected their limitations onto you. The voice that makes you doubt your worth might sound suspiciously like an ex-partner who didn't know how to value you. The moment you separate voice from self, something shifts. You realize, if these voices have names and origins, they are not the core of you. Once you've made that separation, the next step is redefining your internal boundaries. Just like you choose whom to allow into your physical space, you have the right to choose which internal voices get your attention. This doesn't mean ignoring all guidance. It means evaluating which echoes offer wisdom and which offer only fear. For example, an echo that whispers "be careful" may be rooted in genuine past danger and can be reframed as mindfulness rather than avoidance. But an echo that shouts you will fail because you always fail is not guidance. It's an outdated script. When you begin to consciously filter your internal dialogue, you reclaim a psychological agency many people don't even realize they've lost. Another powerful technique is value anchoring. Echoes are strong because they act as shortcuts. To override them, you need stronger, more deliberate shortcuts, your own values. Ask yourself, what matters most to me today? Not what mattered to your parents or teachers or old relationships. What matters to you right now? Maybe it's creativity or courage or authenticity or curiosity. When you define your values, your real voice finally has something to stand on. For example, if an echo says, "Don't speak up, you'll embarrass yourself," your value of authenticity responds, "Speaking up is part of who I want to be." The goal is not to argue with echoes, the goal is to drown them out with clarity. Let's explore another technique, the future self filter. When you're unsure whether a thought belongs to you or an echo, imagine your future self, 5 or 10 years from now, speaking to you. That version of you isn't trying to protect old wounds or live up to someone else's expectations. They've lived, grown, and shed what no longer serves them. Ask, what would my future self say right now? Most people find that this imagined voice is kinder, more balanced, more grounded. That's because your real voice naturally grows healthier when it's not entangled in inherited fears. Now let's talk about emotional triggers, because echoes don't just appear during big decisions. They flare up during emotionally charged moments. If someone raises their voice, you might immediately hear an internal echo of inadequacy because it's tied to childhood conflict. If someone withdraws, you might hear an echo of instability from past relationships. Echoes ride on emotional memories. The key to breaking this cycle is grounding. When you feel an internal voice rising sharply, take a moment to identify what emotion has been activated: fear, shame, anger, helplessness. Once you label the emotion, you weaken the echo because echoes need emotional fog to sound convincing. Clarity is their enemy. Let's get practical with a simple exercise, the reclaiming sentence. Anytime you notice an echo dominating your mind, complete this sentence. That's the old voice saying underscore, 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 underscore. My voice says underscore, 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 underscore. For example, that's the old voice saying I'm not capable. My voice says I can learn. Or, that's the old voice saying don't take up space. My voice says I deserve to exist fully. The structure matters. You're not suppressing the echo. You're repositioning it as background noise while placing your true voice in the foreground. Another essential step in rewriting echo thinking is learning how to create internal safety. Echoes often form in moments where you felt emotionally unsafe, judged, ignored, dismissed, or pressured. To rewrite those patterns, you need to cultivate a sense of internal stability. One method is emotional neutralization, telling yourself, it's safe for me to think this, or it's safe for me to try, or it's safe for me to be unsure. Safety allows new beliefs to take root. Without it, the brain automatically defaults to echoes because they feel familiar. Here's one more deeply effective technique, narrative replacement. Echoes survive by offering a single interpretation of events, usually negative or limiting. When you consciously rewrite these narratives, you create new mental pathways. For example, if the echo says, if you fail, you'll prove everyone right, your new narrative might be, if I fail, I'll gain experience. And if I succeed, I'll expand my possibilities. Or if the echo says you're too sensitive, your new narrative could be, I'm perceptive and that's a strength. Over time, your mind stops defaulting to the old echo because it becomes outnumbered by healthier narratives. At this point, some people ask, but can echo thinking ever truly go away? The honest answer is that echoes fade but rarely disappear completely. And that's okay. The goal is not silence, it's sovereignty. The goal is not to erase every old voice, it's to choose which voice leads. Imagine your mind as a conference table. The echoes can be there, but you're the one at the head of the table. You are the decision maker, the guiding presence, the one who integrates insight rather than reacts out of fear. And here's the most liberating part. As you strengthen your inner voice, the tone of your internal world changes. You become more self-trusting, more grounded, more resilient. Decisions become clearer because they reflect your values, not someone else's expectations. Reactions become calmer because you're not fighting old battles in every interaction. Your self-esteem improves because it's no longer built on inherited criticism. You begin to live as the author of your story, not the echo chamber of your past. As you continue this journey, remember that your real voice is not something you create. It's something you uncover. It has always been there, beneath the noise. Every time you pause, notice an echo, and choose differently, you move closer to hearing yourself clearly. Every time you align your choices with your values rather than old fears, you reclaim another piece of your identity. And every time you speak kindly to yourself, you build a new echo, one that supports you rather than limits you. If this video helped you recognize even one echo that has shaped your inner world without your permission, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to Mind Unlocked. Each episode is designed to help you notice the unseen forces shaping your mind and give you a practical toolkit for building a clearer, calmer, and more authentic inner voice. Here, you're not just learning about your mind, you're learning to reclaim it.